The shrill ring of my phone pierced through the kitchen, startling me as I piped delicate rosettes onto Daniel's birthday cake. I fumbled for the device, smearing frosting across my cheek in the process. "Hello?" I answered, breathless. "Clara, darling, it's Rhonda." My mother-in-law's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. My stomach clenched. "I'm calling about Daniel's birthday dinner tonight." I gripped the phone tighter. "Oh, what about it?" "Well, I've decided to bring my famous pot roast. I know how much Daniel loves it." My jaw tightened. "That's thoughtful, Rhonda, but I've already prepared everything. The menu is set." "Oh, nonsense." Rhonda laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "There's always room for improvement, dear. Besides, we both know your cooking could use a little assistance." I bit my tongue, tasting blood. "Rhonda, I appreciate the offer, but it's settled then," she chirped. "I'll see you at 6. Don't forget to set an extra place at the table." The line went dead before I could protest further. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking with frustration. How dare she? This was my home, my husband's birthday. And yet, once again, Rhonda was steamrolling over my carefully laid plans. I glanced at the clock. 4 hours until dinner. 4 hours to figure out how to salvage this evening without causing a scene. Daniel deserved a perfect birthday, not another tense family standoff. The front door opened and I heard Daniel's familiar footsteps. "Honey, I'm home," he called out. I plastered on a smile as he entered the kitchen, determined not to let Rhonda's interference ruin our moment. "Welcome home, birthday boy," I said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Daniel's eyes widened as he took in the mess of baking supplies strewn across the counter. "Wow, you've been busy. Is that my cake?" I nodded, gesturing proudly to the half-decorated confection. "Chocolate fudge with vanilla buttercream. Your favorite." He wrapped his arms around me, nuzzling my neck. "You're the best, Clara. I can't wait for tonight." I stiffened involuntarily, and Daniel pulled back, concern etching his features. "What's wrong?" I sighed, knowing I couldn't hide my distress from him. "Your mother called." Daniel's expression darkened. "What did she do now?" "She's bringing her pot roast to dinner. Uninvited, of course." He groaned, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, Clara. I know how hard you've worked on this dinner." I shrugged, trying to downplay my disappointment. "It's fine. We'll make it work." Daniel's jaw clenched. "No, it's not fine. This is our home, and she can't just barge in and take over whenever she feels like it." I touched his arm, surprised by the intensity of his reaction. "Daniel, it's okay. Let's not let her ruin your birthday." He shook his head, a determined glint in his eye. "No, Clara. It's time we set some boundaries with my mother. I'll call her right now and tell her to leave the pot roast at home." As Daniel reached for his phone, a wave of anxiety washed over me. "Wait," I blurted out. Maybe we should just let her bring it, for the sake of peace?" Daniel's brow furrowed. "Clara, you can't keep letting her walk all over you, over us." I bit my lip, torn between my desire for a conflict-free evening and the need to stand up for myself. "I know, but..." The doorbell rang, cutting me off mid-sentence. Daniel and I exchanged puzzled glances. We weren't expecting anyone for hours. "I'll get it," Daniel said, striding towards the front door. I followed close behind, my heart racing. As Daniel swung the door open, I gasped. There stood Rhonda, pot roast in hand, a triumphant smile plastered across her face. "Surprise!" she trilled. "I thought I'd come early to help set up. After all, we can't have Daniel's birthday dinner be anything less than perfect, can we?" I felt the blood drain from my face as Rhonda swept past us into the house, leaving the scent of her overpowering perfume in her wake. As she disappeared into the kitchen, Daniel turned to me, his expression a mix of anger and resignation. "Happy birthday to me," he muttered. As Rhonda bustled around my kitchen, rearranging dishes and criticizing my decor, I retreated to the sanctuary of our bedroom. Daniel followed, closing the door behind us with a soft click. "I'm so sorry, Clara," he said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "This isn't how I wanted today to go." I buried my face in his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. It transported me back to our first date, a picnic in the park where we'd talked for hours under a canopy of stars. Daniel had been so nervous, he'd spilled wine all over his shirt. I'd fallen in love with his laughter that night. "Remember our honeymoon?" I asked, looking up at him. Daniel's eyes crinkled as he smiled. "How could I forget? That rickety old cabin in the mountains." "With the leaky roof," I added, chuckling. "And the family of raccoons living under the porch," Daniel finished. We both burst into laughter, the tension of the past hour momentarily forgotten. This was why I loved him. His ability to find joy in the simplest moments, to make me feel safe and cherished even when the world was chaos. A crash from the kitchen jolted us back to reality. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. I should go see what she's broken now. I caught his arm as he turned to leave. Wait, I have something for you. I reached into the dresser drawer and pulled out a small wrapped package. Daniel's eyes lit up. Clara, you didn't have to. Open it, I urged. He tore off the paper, revealing a leather-bound journal. It's beautiful, he murmured, flipping through the blank pages. I thought you could use it for your poetry, I explained. You haven't written in so long, and I know how much you love it. Daniel's expression softened. You remembered. Of course I did. I remember everything about you, Daniel. He cupped my face in his hands, kissing me deeply. For a moment, I forgot about Rhonda, about the ruined dinner plans, about everything except the feel of Daniel's lips on mine. Another crash, louder this time, shattered our bubble of peace. I'd better go, Daniel said reluctantly. I nodded, squeezing his hand. I'll be right behind you. As Daniel left to deal with his mother, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. I wouldn't let Rhonda ruin this day. Not when I'd worked so hard to make it special for Daniel. I emerged from the bedroom to find Rhonda standing in the hallway, arms crossed. There you are, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your hosting duties entirely. I forced a smile. Just giving Daniel his birthday gift, Rhonda, she sniffed. Well, I hope it was better than that sad excuse for a cake I saw in the kitchen. Really, Clara, store-bought would have been kinder. My cheeks burned with anger and embarrassment. I'd spent hours on that cake, perfecting every detail. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared behind his mother. Mom, he said, his voice tight with barely contained fury. That's enough. Rhonda turned, her expression morphing into one of wounded innocence. Daniel, darling, I was just offering some constructive criticism. You know I only want the best for you. The best for me would be if you stopped attacking my wife, Daniel snapped. Rhonda gasped, clutching her pearls. Daniel, how could you say such a thing? After everything I've done for you. I watched the confrontation unfold, my heart racing. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. As much as I appreciated Daniel standing up for me, I feared this would only make things worse. Maybe we should all take a moment to calm down, I suggested, stepping between them. Rhonda's eyes narrowed. Oh, I'm perfectly calm, dear. It's not my fault if you can't handle a little honest feedback. Daniel opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off. Why don't we move this conversation to the living room? I'm sure Fred will be here soon, and we can all sit down and enjoy a nice family dinner. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. I silently thanked whatever higher power had decided to intervene. That must be Dad, Daniel said, moving towards the door. But when he opened it, it wasn't Fred standing on our porch. Instead, a smartly dressed woman with a briefcase stood before us, her expression grave. Daniel Thompson? She asked. Daniel nodded, confused. I'm Sarah Lawson from Evergreen Bank. I'm here about your father's accounts. I'm afraid there's been some irregularities. The tension in the room was palpable as Sarah Lawson from Evergreen Bank explained the situation. Daniel's face grew increasingly pale, while Rhonda fidgeted nervously with her pearl necklace. I stood there, stunned, trying to process the implications of what we were hearing. I'm sorry, but could you please explain this again? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded sympathetically. Of course, we've detected some unusual activity on Mr. Frederick Thompson's accounts. Large sums of money have been withdrawn over the past few months, far exceeding normal spending patterns. Daniel's jaw clenched. And you're sure it's not just a mistake? I'm afraid not, Mr. Thompson. The transactions appear to be authorized, but given the amounts involved, we felt it necessary to investigate further. Just then, the front door opened, and Fred walked in, his usual cheerful demeanor instantly evaporating as he took in the scene before him. What's going on? He asked, his eyes darting between us and the bank representative. Daniel turned to his father, his voice strained. Dad, this is Sarah from Evergreen Bank. She says there's been some unusual activity on your accounts. Fred's brow furrowed in confusion. What kind of unusual activity? As Sarah began to explain again, I noticed Rhonda inching towards the kitchen, her face a mask of barely concealed panic. Something about her behavior set off alarm bells in my head. Rhonda, I called out, causing her to freeze mid-step. Where are you going? All eyes turned to my mother-in-law, who plastered on an unconvincing smile. Oh, I just thought I'd check on the pot roast. We don't want it to overcook, do we? Fred's expression hardened. Rhonda, what have you done? The room fell silent as Rhonda's facade crumbled. She collapsed into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Daniel took a step towards his mother, his voice low and dangerous. What exactly are you sorry for, Mom? Rhonda looked up, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I may have borrowed some money from your father's accounts, just to tide us over, you understand. Things have been tight lately, with all the renovations and the new car. Fred's face turned an alarming shade of red. Borrowed? Rhonda, how much did you take? Sarah cleared her throat, drawing our attention back to her. According to our records, the total amount withdrawn over the past 6 months is just over $200,000. The room erupted into chaos. Fred bellowed in disbelief. Daniel started pacing and muttering under his breath, and Rhonda's sobs grew louder. I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. I'll pay it back, Rhonda wailed. I promise. I just need a little more time. Fred's laugh was bitter and hollow. With what money, Rhonda? You haven't worked a day in your life. Where exactly do you think this magical repayment is going to come from? As the argument escalated, I slipped out of the room, desperately needing a moment to collect my thoughts. I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the half-finished birthday cake I'd worked so hard on. It seemed like a lifetime ago that my biggest worry had been Rhonda's interference with dinner plans. A gentle hand on my shoulder made me jump. I turned to find Fred standing there, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. I'm so sorry, Clara, he said softly. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. I reached out and squeezed his hand. It's not your fault, Fred. You couldn't have known, he sighed heavily. I should have seen the signs. Rhonda's always been a spendthrift, but this is something else entirely. We stood in silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of Daniel and Rhonda's continued argument drifting in from the living room. What are you going to do? I asked finally. Fred's eyes hardened with resolve. Whatever it takes to fix this mess. But first, I need you to tell me everything you know about Rhonda's spending habits, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. As I began to speak, detailing years of observations and suspicions I'd kept to myself, I realized that this birthday dinner had become the catalyst for a family reckoning that was long overdue. And somehow, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee as Daniel paced back and forth. The events of the past few hours had left us both reeling, and the weight of what we'd discovered pressed down on us like a physical force. I can't believe she did this, Daniel muttered, running his hands through his hair for the 100th time. How could she steal from her own husband? I sighed, pushing the mug away. I don't know, Daniel, but we need to figure out what to do next. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression a mix of anger and determination. We confront her. Tonight. At dinner. My stomach churned at the thought. Are you sure that's wise? Maybe we should wait. Talk to your father first. No, Daniel cut me off. We've waited long enough. Mom needs to face the consequences of her actions. Just then, Fred walked in, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He'd spent the last hour on the phone with the bank, trying to get more details about the unauthorized withdrawals. Any news? I asked, dreading the answer. Fred shook his head. It's worse than we thought. Rhonda didn't just take from my retirement savings. She's opened credit cards in my name, taken out loans. We're looking at close to $500,000 in debt. The room fell silent as the magnitude of Rhonda's deception sank in. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, thinking about the years of careful saving that had been wiped out in a matter of months. Daniel slammed his fist on the counter, making us both jump. That's it. I'm calling the police. Wait, Fred said, his voice surprisingly calm. Let's think this through. If we involve the authorities, it could ruin Rhonda's life. Is that really what we want? I stared at Fred in disbelief. But she's already ruined your life, Fred. Your retirement, your savings. It's all gone. He sighed heavily. I know, but she's still my wife, the mother of my child. There has to be another way. As Fred and Daniel argued about the best course of action, I found myself drifting to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across our once peaceful neighborhood. How had we gotten here? How had Rhonda's pettiness and greed managed to destroy so much? Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye. A sleek, unfamiliar car was pulling into our driveway. My heart sank as I recognized the driver. She's here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel and Fred fell silent, turning to look at me. Who's here? Daniel asked. Rhonda. We watched in stunned silence as Rhonda emerged from the car, dressed in an expensive new outfit, her arms laden with shopping bags. She sauntered up the driveway as if she didn't have a care in the world. Something inside me snapped. All the years of enduring her criticism, her manipulation, her thinly veiled insults, it all came rushing to the surface. I have an idea, I said, turning to face Daniel and Fred. We go through with the dinner as planned. But instead of confronting her outright, we let her dig her own grave. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. What do you mean? We play along, let her think everything's normal. But we ask questions, innocent ones, about her new clothes, her recent purchases. We give her enough rope to hang herself. Fred nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. And then, I said, my voice hard with resolve, when she's good and comfortable, when she thinks she's gotten away with everything, we spring the trap. Daniel looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Clara, I had no idea you could be so devious. I managed a grim smile. Your mother's taught me a thing or two over the years. It's time I put those lessons to good use. As the doorbell rang, announcing Rhonda's arrival, we exchanged determined looks. The stage was set, the players in position. It was time to serve up a dish Rhonda wouldn't soon forget, a heaping plate of long-overdue justice. Let the games begin, I murmured, smoothing my dress and plastering on my best fake smile as I went to answer the door. I opened the door, my heart pounding as I faced Rhonda. She breezed past me, her designer perfume leaving a cloying trail in her wake. Clara, darling, she trilled, air-kissing my cheek. I hope you don't mind. I brought a little something extra for dinner. I forced a smile, eyeing the expensive-looking bottle of wine in her hand. How thoughtful, I managed, wondering how many of Fred's hard-earned dollars had paid for it. As we entered the dining room, I caught Daniel's eye. He gave me a subtle nod, reminding me of our plan. Fred sat at the head of the table, his face a carefully composed mask. Well, doesn't this look quaint? Rhonda remarked, surveying the table I'd spent hours preparing. Her tone made it clear that quaint was not a compliment. I bit my tongue, reminding myself to play along. Thank you for noticing, Rhonda. I do try my best. We took our seats, an uncomfortable silence settling over the table. I served the food, my hands shaking slightly as I placed Rhonda's plate in front of her. My, Rhonda said, fingering her new diamond necklace. Isn't this a lovely little spread? Although, Clara dear, you really should invest in some proper china. These everyday plates are so pedestrian. I saw Daniel's jaw clench, but he remained silent. It was Fred who spoke up. I think Clara's done a wonderful job, he said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. Don't you agree, Rhonda? After all, it's not about the fancy plates, but the love that goes into the meal. Rhonda's laugh was brittle. Oh, Fred, you're such a sentimentalist, but I suppose that's why I love you. As we ate, I carefully steered the conversation towards Rhonda's recent purchases. That's a beautiful necklace, Rhonda. Is it new? She preened, touching the glittering stones. Oh, this old thing? Just a little treat I picked up last week. A woman deserves to spoil herself now and then, don't you think? Absolutely, I agreed, my voice sickly sweet. And those shopping bags I saw you bring in, more little treats? Rhonda's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed. Just a few necessities. You know how it is. Daniel leaned forward, his expression innocent. Speaking of necessities, Mom, I've been meaning to ask, how's that charity work you were so passionate about last year, the one for underprivileged children? I watched as a flicker of panic crossed Rhonda's face before she composed herself. Oh, that. Well, you know how these things go. I've been so busy lately, I haven't had much time for volunteer work. Fred nodded sympathetically. It's a shame. I remember you were so excited about it. Didn't you even make a sizable donation? Rhonda's laugh was too loud, too forced. Did I? I can't quite recall. You know how forgetful I can be about these things. The tension in the room was palpable. I could see Rhonda's eyes darting between us, sensing that something was off but unable to pinpoint what. Just as I was about to push further, Rhonda's phone rang. She fumbled for it, relief evident on her face at the interruption. Oh, I must take this, she said, standing abruptly. It's my investment advisor. Very important. As she hurried from the room, I exchanged glances with Daniel and Fred. We'd heard enough to confirm our suspicions, but we needed concrete proof. I'm going to follow her, I whispered, rising from my seat. Daniel caught my arm. Clara, are you sure? It could be dangerous if she catches you. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. We need to know the truth, Daniel. All of it. This might be our only chance. With a nod from both men, I slipped out of the dining room. I could hear Rhonda's hushed voice coming from the guest bathroom. Silently, I crept closer, my heart racing as I prepared to uncover the full extent of her deception. As I pressed my ear to the door, Rhonda's words made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about stolen money or secret credit cards. What I heard in that moment would change everything, pushing our family drama into territory I never could have imagined. I knew then that I had a choice to make, one that would determine the fate of our family forever. My hand trembled as I turned the doorknob. Stepping back into the dining room, Daniel and Fred looked up expectantly, their faces etched with concern. "Clara?" Daniel asked, rising from his chair. "What happened? What did you hear?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. How could I tell them what I just discovered? Before I could gather my thoughts, Rhonda swept back into the room, her face flushed with triumph. "Well, that was a productive call," she announced, settling into her seat. "I've just secured a fantastic investment opportunity. We'll be rolling in money soon enough." Fred's eyebrows shot up. "We? What exactly do you mean, Rhonda?" Rhonda waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you know, darling, our family, our future. It's all taken care of." I couldn't hold back any longer. "Is that what you told your lover on the phone, Rhonda? That you've taken care of everything?" The room fell silent. Rhonda's face drained of color, her eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. Daniel stood up slowly, his voice dangerously low. "Mom, what's going on? What is Clara talking about?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I heard you, Rhonda, on the phone. You're not just stealing money. You're planning to leave, to run away with someone and take everything Fred has left." Fred's face crumpled, years of pain and betrayal etched into every line. "Is this true, Rhonda? After everything we've been through?" Rhonda's shock quickly morphed into defiance. She stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "You don't understand. None of you do. I deserve more than this mundane existence. I'm meant for greater things." "Greater things?" Daniel exploded. "You've stolen from your own family. You've lied, cheated, and now you're planning to abandon us?" Rhonda's laugh was bitter and cold. "Abandon you? Please. You're all adults. It's time I lived for myself for once." I watched in horror as she turned her venom towards me. "And you, Clara, little Miss Perfect, always trying so hard to please everyone. Did you think eavesdropping would make you the family hero? You're pathetic." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. "At least I have integrity, Rhonda. At least I know the value of family and love." "Love?" Rhonda spat. "Love doesn't pay for designer clothes or exotic vacations. Love is for fools and dreamers." Fred stood up slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get out." Rhonda blinked, taken aback. "What did you say?" "I said, get out," Fred repeated, his voice gaining strength. "You're no longer welcome in this house or in our lives." For a moment, Rhonda looked genuinely shocked. Then her face hardened into a mask of contempt. "Fine. I don't need any of you. I've got everything I need right here." She patted her designer handbag meaningfully. As she strode towards the door, Daniel called out, "Wait!" We all turned to look at him. His face was a storm of emotions, anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Before you go, Mom," he said, his voice tight with control, "there's something you should know." Rhonda paused, her hand on the doorknob. "And what's that, dear?" Daniel's smile was grim. "While you were on the phone, I called the police. They're on their way right now." The color drained from Rhonda's face. You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" Daniel challenged. "You've left us no choice, Mom. It's time you face the consequences of your actions." As if on cue, we heard the distant wail of police sirens. Rhonda's eyes widened in panic. She lunged for the door, but Fred was quicker. He blocked her path, his normally gentle face set in stone. "It's over, Rhonda," he said softly. As the sirens grew louder, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread wash over me. This was it, the moment of truth. But as I looked at the shattered remains of our family dinner, I couldn't help but wonder, even if justice was served, could we ever truly recover from this betrayal? The police sirens grew louder, their wailing a fitting soundtrack to the chaos unfolding in our dining room. Rhonda's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape route. But Fred stood firm, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by an unyielding resolve. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rhonda's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. I'm your wife." Fred's laugh was hollow. "A wife who's stolen from me, lied to me, and planned to abandon me. No, Rhonda, you stopped being my wife long ago. I watched in stunned silence as years of pent-up frustration and hurt poured out of Fred. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a torrent of emotions he'd kept bottled up for far too long. Do you have any idea what you've done? Fred continued, his voice rising. The years of hard work, the sacrifices we made, all gone because of your greed. Rhonda's defiance crumbled, replaced by a desperation that made her look older and smaller. Fred, please, she pleaded. We can work this out. I'll change, I promise. But Fred was unmoved. It's too late for promises, Rhonda. Far too late. The sound of car doors slamming outside jolted us all. Rhonda made one last desperate lunge for the back door, but Daniel intercepted her, grasping her arm firmly. Enough, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's over. As if on cue, there was a sharp knock at the front door. I moved to answer it, my legs feeling like lead. 2 police officers stood on our porch, their faces grim. We received a call about a theft, one of them asked. I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. As they entered the dining room, the scene before them must have looked surreal. The remnants of a birthday dinner, a family in tatters, and a woman clutching a designer handbag like a lifeline. What happened next was a blur. Rhonda was read her rights, handcuffed, and led away. As she passed me, she hissed, "This is all your fault, Clara. I hope you're happy now." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Was this my fault? Had my desire for justice destroyed our family? As the police car drove away, its lights flashing in the darkness, an eerie silence fell over the house. Daniel, Fred, and I stood in the living room, the weight of what had just transpired hanging heavy in the air. Fred was the first to speak. I need to sit down, he mumbled, collapsing into an armchair. Daniel rushed to his father's side. Dad, are you okay? Do you need anything? Fred shook his head, looking suddenly old and frail. How did we get here? He asked, his voice barely audible. Where did it all go wrong? I felt a lump form in my throat. This man, who had always been so strong, so dependable, now looked utterly lost. And in that moment, I realized the true cost of Rhonda's actions, not just in dollars and cents, but in trust shattered and lives upended. Daniel caught my eye, his expression a mix of grief and determination. We'll get through this, he said, as much to himself as to us. We're still a family. We'll figure it out together. But as I looked around the room, at Fred's slumped shoulders, at the half-eaten birthday cake on the dining table, at the empty space where Rhonda should have been, I couldn't help but wonder if some wounds were too deep to heal. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight, marking the end of this disastrous day. But as the last chime faded away, I realized that this wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of a long, painful journey, one that would test the bonds of our family like never before. As I sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally overtaking me, one question echoed in my mind. Where do we go from here? 6 months had passed since that fateful night when our family was torn apart. As I stood in our backyard, watching Daniel and Fred set up tables for our annual summer barbecue, I marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The sound of laughter drew my attention to the porch, where our extended family was gathering. Cousins, aunts, uncles, faces I hadn't seen in years. It turns out Rhonda's deceit had reached far beyond our immediate circle, isolating us from those we loved most. Clara? Daniel's voice pulled me from my reverie. You okay? I smiled, reaching for his hand. Just thinking about how far we've come. He squeezed my fingers, understanding in his eyes. It hasn't been easy, but we made it. As if on cue, Fred joined us, a spring in his step that I hadn't seen in years. The grill's all fired up. Who's ready for some burgers? The cheerful chorus of responses warmed my heart. This was what family was supposed to be, supportive, loving, united. As we settled around the tables, the conversation flowed freely. Stories were shared, old wounds began to heal, and new connections were forged. I found myself next to Aunt Mildred, Rhonda's sister, who had been estranged from us for years. I can't tell you how sorry I am, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. I had no idea what Rhonda was doing. If I'd known. I patted her hand gently. You couldn't have known. None of us did. She nodded, dabbing at her eyes. When I found out, well, let's just say Rhonda won't be getting any support from our side of the family. What she did was unforgivable. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the betrayal, the long nights spent comforting Fred as he grappled with the loss of his life savings. But also the strength we'd found in each other, the bonds that had been tested and emerged stronger than ever. Just as the sun began to set, Casting a golden glow over our gathering, Daniel clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet yard. "To family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose. To second chances and new beginnings." A chorus of "hear, hear" echoed around the tables. As I raised my glass, I caught Fred's eye. The pain was still there, a shadow behind his smile, but there was something else too. Hope, resilience, and a determination to move forward. "And," Daniel continued, his gaze finding mine, "to my beautiful wife Clara. Without her strength, her compassion, and her unwavering love, we might not be here today. She held us together when everything was falling apart." Tears pricked my eyes as Daniel pulled me close, planting a kiss on my forehead. The applause and cheers from our family washed over me, a balm to the wounds of the past 6 months. As the party began to wind down, I found myself alone with Fred by the old oak tree. He looked thoughtful, his eyes distant. "Penny for your thoughts?" I asked softly. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am. Despite everything, I still have so much to be grateful for." I nodded, understanding completely. We all do. Fred turned to me, his expression serious. "Clara, I want you to know, you're the daughter I always wished I had. Thank you for being there for us, for me." Overcome with emotion, I pulled him into a tight hug. As we embraced, I felt the last pieces of our fractured family clicking back into place. Later that night, as Daniel and I cleared the last of the dishes, he paused, pulling me into his arms. "Happy anniversary, Clara," he whispered. I blinked in surprise. With everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten. Daniel chuckled at my expression. "I know, I almost forgot too. But then I realized, today marks 6 months since that disastrous birthday dinner. 6 months since we started rebuilding." As I looked into his eyes, I saw our future stretching out before us, bright, full of love, and stronger for having weathered the storm. "Happy anniversary, Daniel," I replied, sealing the words with a kiss. We had survived Rhonda's betrayal, emerged from the darkness, and found our way back to the light. And in that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family.